God, and then seize our destiny.
I'm doing it for myself. If it helps put smiles on people's faces, helps them live their lives together, then that's my role in this world!
I can't kill you, but I can stop your blade. And I'll do it over and over again until we understand each other. Okay?
It's so strange. I don't even know what I'm doing here anymore. Everyone's all wrong. They all said but now you two. Did I go wrong somewhere?
Xenoblade Chronicles is probably the Nintendo franchise most concerned with its cinematic storytelling. Sure, Zelda may have a deep and complex lore and mythology, and yes, Fire Emblem is known for a cast of beloved characters with rich personalities, but Xenoblade is unique in that its narrative elements are not pushed off to the side as something to complement gameplay. As a traditional JRPG, albeit one that reinvents the wheel with its unique combat, Xenoblade is a game whose gameplay is dictated by its story as you travel across the world to fulfill narrative beats while occasionally dealing with obstacles that are more interesting as challenges for the characters than for the players. And that story is often an impressive one, an emotional tale in a massive world, all told with full voice acting and cinematic cutscenes. I loved Xenoblade Chronicles, which might make it odd that it took so long for me to play the sequel, Xenoblade Chronicles 2. When it first released in 2017, I was fresh out of college and didn't have a lot of cash to spare. Eventually, I decided to avoid playing it entirely in order to save it for Smasterpieces, a podcast I do with a friend where we are playing one game for every fighter in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate.
What the fuck?
Xenoblade 2 was the obvious choice for Pyra and Mythra, so I decided that in order to keep my experience for the podcast fresh, I wouldn't be playing the game unless Nintendo happened to announce Xenoblade 3. And of course, that is exactly what happened. So I started playing immediately, marathoning my way through the experience and eventually finishing it almost exactly 1 month later. It was a game that I was driven to keep playing, one that consumed my time and attention like no other. And I kinda hated it. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a game that I haven't been able to stop thinking about, even now several months after finishing it. I had plenty of issues with the gameplay, from awful gacha mechanics to poorly signposted quests, all the way down to how unbelievably tedious filling out the skill trees is. But these were all things that I expected from hearing common criticisms of Xenoblade 2. What I have heard far less about is the game's story, plot, and characters, which I found to be a significant step down from the original Xenoblade Chronicles. The fact that I found so little critical discussion of the story bothered me in a way that I just couldn't escape. I'm not so arrogant as to say that it's wrong for people to like something that I didn't like, but it was alienating to look around and see just how unique my feelings on the game seemed to be. That feeling of isolation is why I just couldn't stop thinking about Xenoblade 2. Or more accurately, why I couldn't stop wanting to talk about it. In a way, I felt like I needed to validate my opinion, but I also wanted to critically examine it in order to be certain that I didn't just feel a shallow sense of rejection for some of the more superficial things I didn't like. So to that end, let me clarify what I will not be talking about. Most criticisms I see of Xenoblade 2 are low-hanging fruit, like the character designs that are more generically anime, the horrific field system, or the infamously poor voice acting.
Ugh! Damn it!
These problems have been discussed to death, and I don't see a lot of value in retreading that ground. I'm gonna put the gameplay and aesthetics aside and focus entirely on what I believe to be the failings of Xenoblade 2's plot, as well as how the original Xenoblade Chronicles manages to succeed in those same areas. So to do all that, let's start at the beginning. Part 1. What is Xenoblade about? The first Xenoblade Chronicles sets up its conflict very quickly. Shulk's core goal, get revenge against the Mechon, is set up within the game's first 2 hours, and any distractions from here on out branch directly off of that path, eventually feeding back into Shulk's goal.
It keeps shouting, make them pay, destroy every single one of them, and it won't stop getting louder.
The first distraction occurs when Shulk and Rein arrive at Gaur Plain and meet Charlotte and Juju. Shulk immediately decides to save Juju from danger, something any good hero would do. But once Juju's life is saved, they discover that his own hometown of Colony 6 has also been destroyed by Mechon, mirroring Shulk's own inciting incident. Juju is quickly kidnapped by the Mechon, leading to a lengthy quest to save him. Although this doesn't directly feed into Shulk's desire to kill Metalface, it lines up with his broad motivation to destroy all Mechon. The distraction also provides key information about the Mechon when Juju's captor Zord reveals that Face Mechon, like Metalface, are fully intelligent beings.
I've been waiting for you, Monado boy.
What? It spoke!
The second distraction is assisting the Nopon and High Entia, which is kicked off when Shulk has a vision of himself confronting Metalface at Prison Island. From here, Shulk doesn't know how or why to get to Prison Island, he just knows that he must, and Dixon tells him that he can accomplish that by meeting the High Entia at Aerith Sea. It's not long from here until Shulk runs into Melia in the Machna Forest.
Get your hands off me!
After the party saves Melia, she agrees to take them to Aerith Sea, but only if they assist her in finding the Nopon and killing a Telethia. The path to Prison Island is long and winding, but every step of the way we know that it's going to lead to Metalface, even if we don't know exactly how. This provides everything that's happening with a sense of purpose. Each action that Shulk and his friends take is a firm step towards completing his goal, which is important because it makes Shulk's desire to attain that goal feel more real. When everything he does is for the sake of that goal, it hammers home just how important achieving it is to him. Of course, Xenoblade's narrative is long and complex, and Shulk's motivations end up being changed by his experiences. After finally reaching Prison Island and learning the truth of Fiora's survival, Shulk learns that the conflict between Bionis and Mechonis is not as black and white as he believed. He meets the Machina, the people of Mechonis who have also been wronged and displaced by the war. Egil, the man responsible for his suffering, is not representative of the rest of his people, making Shulk's quest for genocidal revenge feel a lot less noble.
Correct. Egil is trying to eradicate all innocent life on Bionis. He's blinded by revenge. Even Lady Mayneth herself couldn't convince him to stop.
When the time finally comes for Shulk and Egil's showdown, Shulk begins to question the voice in his head that's been encouraging him to seek revenge from the very beginning.
Kill him.
That voice. Who is that?
Strike him down.
Shulk realizes that this voice is not his own, and he takes advantage of this moment of self-doubt to make the first choice in the game that was truly his own. Shulk's desire for revenge is then flipped on its head as he and Egil become allies, and the two meet the true villain of Xenoblade Chronicles, the man who conspired to pit them against each other, Zanza.
As all that exists is interconnected, time can flow only towards the inevitable. That is the vision of which I, the Monado, am the origin.
Shulk's goals and motivations are not only clear, but they also drive the plot of the game from beginning to end. By comparison, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 has a lot more trouble deriving plot and conflict from the goals of its own main protagonist, Rex. Rex's primary motivation is stated pretty early in the story. He wants to bring Pyra to Elysium. It's a clear goal, but it's one that lacks both focus and emotional justification. Rex begins the game as a simple salvager living on his own with the Titan Azurda, but his world is turned upside down when he ends up on a job with the terrorist group Torna. Rex is mortally wounded, but his life is saved by Pyra, who tells him her wish to go to Elysium.
Can you take me to Elysium?
Elysium? But there's no way. I'm dead, remember? How can I help if I'm not breathing?
I will give you half of my life force. That way, you can be revived.
The decision to go to Elysium isn't given any emotional pathos. Pyra's motivations are kept secret, and for Rex it's practically a business transaction. Pyra saves his life with Rex's payment being passage to Elysium. There's no childhood friend to be aided or avenged, and no quest for absolution or self-satisfaction. Just a cryptic promise from Pyra that Rex could be the hero who saves the world, and then the adventure begins. After that, the next scene that gives an insight to Rex and Pyra as characters is the ending of Chapter 2, where their relationship already has a bit of a romantic tone. They awkwardly flirt with each other, and the two trust each other implicitly, even though this is effectively their second scene together that isn't purely about exposition or driving the plot forward.
So beautiful.
Yeah. It really is. I guess that's probably because you made it, Pyra.
Huh?
No. What? I didn't mean it like that. You're just, really good at making fires. That's all.
It's what I do.
At this point, Rex doesn't really have his own goal. Aside from some vague notion of saving the world, a feat that he doesn't even understand how to accomplish, his only desire is to fulfill the wish of a girl he's only just met and barely knows. However, the unsatisfying motives behind Rex's goal aren't the only problem with the story. The quest itself trudges forward slowly as distractions are frequent and actual progress is rare. After a single failed attempt to fly to Elysium, Rex and friends end up in Araya, where they meet a mercenary company led by Vandem. The party joins Vandem on a mission and hangs out with the company for a few days with almost no mention of Elysium at all. It's only after a full mission is complete that Vandem finally mentions that he knows someone who might be able to help Pyra get to Elysium.
Well, I've got an old mate in the Orion capital. Got a feeling he might know a way through.
Really?
Yeah, I gotta go there anyhow, so I could introduce you.
That someone is Cole, who doesn't actually give them any help until an entire chapter passes. Sure, we have a couple of run-ins with Torna and a few big character moments with Vandem's death and Mythra's first appearance, but almost all of Chapter 3 passes without Rex having any idea of what the next step of his quest will be. It isn't until the beginning of Chapter 4 where Cole tells the party to travel to Indol, where they can find someone who might be able to help get to Elysium. Not only is this our second person that merely might be able to help advance the quest, but Cole never actually explains who they should be looking for. Like, he tells Rex to look for the man who was once his driver, but at this point Rex doesn't know who that is. So at this point, Rex has no idea what the next step of his quest is. All he knows is that he must find a man he has never met and has not been told anything about in order to maybe get more information. Unfortunately, it's going to be a while before we actually get to that information, because first we need to deal with the filler arc. Petty thieves pickpocket Rex and steal the core crystal belonging to Vandem's blade, Rock. This arc is 20 minutes long from cutscenes alone, and it goes nowhere and is never mentioned again. The trip to Indol then leads to a stop in Mor Ardain, where the party is quickly caught up in a lengthy excursion involving Tora's father that has nothing to do with the quest to reach Elysium. Once we do finally reach Indol, the plot is again interrupted when Jin sparks a war that is resolved just as suddenly as it begins.
What's the deal with this ceasefire?
A tribunal, it looks like. Praetor on Malthus is here in person. And who's going to argue with the Praetor?
Does he have any clue how many men we lost? If those Ardanians get away with this, architect, damn it.
Quit your grumbling, mate. All this is way beyond our pay grade.
It is only now, 2 full chapters after getting info from Cole, that we finally receive instructions from Amalthus, who explains that we need to go to Tontal, where the king might be able to get us to Elysium. So let's recap. Vandem told us that Cole might be able to help us get to Elysium. Cole told us that Amalthus might be able to help us get to Elysium. Amalthus told us that the King of Tontal might be able to help us get to Elysium. We are at chapter 6 of 10, and we are no closer to getting Pyra to Elysium than we were at the very beginning of the game. What's worse is that the quest is completed almost by accident. More distractions await in Tontal as the party is tricked and betrayed by the king. Rex and friends must save Pyra, who is then promptly kidnapped by Jin and Malos, and another lengthy detour to Fonset occurs before we can rescue her. After Rex finally confronts Jin and Malos to rescue Pyra, they end up falling into the Cloud Sea and landing in Moratha, which, by total coincidence, leads directly to the World Tree and thus to Elysium.
Are those the World Tree's roots?
Yeah. I bet there's a way up there.
There has to be. I'm good to go.
And that's it. The majority of the game's story has no progress towards the main character's primary goal whatsoever, and in the end, that goal is achieved by coincidence. It's a far cry from Xenoblade Chronicles 1, where everything that Shulk did had a clear and obvious role in his quest. Everything Shulk did brought him closer to Mechonis, closer to Egil, closer to Zanza. Everything Rex does is blindly grasping at straws in the hopes that one of them will eventually bring him to Elysium. The structure of the plot in Xenoblade 2 is practically non-existent. So, what exactly is Xenoblade 2 about? What is actually going on over the 70 hours it takes to finish the game? To understand that, we're gonna have to talk about Part 2, Scenes and Moments. Xenoblade Chronicles is a franchise filled with big moments. Moments where the music swells, emotions run high, and the story takes a turn that is meant to be big and memorable. This idea of the big movie moment is something that YouTuber NerdWriter1 discussed in his video about Batman v Superman.
Movie moments are awesome. A really great moment can be transcendent. They can leave deep, lifelong visual impressions on a filmgoer. They can come to represent a whole new category of feeling. That's why film geeks like me reference them so much in conversation with friends. When you're a film student, at least when I was a film student, that's what makes things exciting. Most of the student films I directed revolved around a few moments that I thought were going to blow people away. If I could just navigate the story there, that would be enough. The moment would do all the work. Then I'd just navigate to the next one. For this reason, my student films weren't that good.
This video, which is great by the way, goes into how Zack Snyder's Batman v Superman struggles with story and characters because it places too heavy an emphasis on its big movie moments. As I was playing Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I kept thinking back to this video and how much I felt like Xenoblade 2 struggled with many of the same issues that NerdWriter1 attributes to Snyder's films. Xenoblade 2 has plenty of big moments. The extravagant battle against Morag and Gormott, Vandam's emotionally charged sacrifice, the escalation of the conflict in Temperantia. These are memorable scenes where the animation steps up in quality, the soundtrack pulls out its strongest bangers, and to phrase it like NerdWriter1, the game tries to broadcast a single message: be odd. The problem is that many of these big moments aren't really tied into the core plot in a way that's narratively compelling or satisfying. This is partially due to the lack of focus on Rex's goals, but the story also suffers from the fact that the narrative beats in between each big moment don't properly lead up to them or undercut the tension and emotion that it took to get there. The sole connecting thread for the first half of the game is Torna, who mainly show up to cause some petty trouble like Team Rocket and then quickly disappear, rarely having any relevance until the game decides that Rex needs to fight someone. The ending of Chapter 3, where Vandam is killed in battle against Torna, leading to the first appearance of Mythra, is a dramatic standoff as well as a big twist in Pyra's character, but with Rex's quest as aimless and stagnant as it is, this scene feels incongruous with its place in the narrative. It feels like this fight and its big moments could have happened at any time. They just happened to occur at this point because we need to finish a chapter with a boss fight and a big moment. The escalation in Temperantia has similar issues. The revelation that Jin is a blade and the death of Fan Lenorn are our resident big moments, but the context of this scene, the beginning of a war between Morardain and Araya, feels once again separated from the narrative, almost coming out of nowhere. Sure, plenty of NPCs talk about the tensions between the two nations, but Rex and his friends are never actually affected by the looming specter of war. The party moves freely between Araya and Morardain with no border conflicts and no run-ins with the military. In fact, Rex actually does square off against Morag, the Ardanian Special Inquisitor, twice, but tensions between her homeland and Araya have nothing to do with these conflicts. In Gormott, Rex and friends infiltrate an Ardanian military base because Nia is arrested on suspicion of being affiliated with a terrorist group. Which, fair? She totally was. In their battle afterwards, Morag isn't concerned with whether the attackers staging a prison break at a military base are Orion spies or anything of the sort. She correctly believes Pyra to be the Aegis, and fears that if left unchecked, she could be a threat to Alrest as a whole.
You're the one who spread the rumor that I was going to be executed, just to lure Rex and the others here.
You catch on quickly. Yes, you certainly proved useful.
Later, in More Ardain, Morag only fights Rex because she mistakes Poppy for Lila, leading to the two working together to uncover and put an end to Chairman Bonna's plots.
It appears I was too hasty in judging you. I should not have attacked you so suddenly. My apologies.
No, that's fine. Nobody got hurt in the end. I'm just glad it all got cleared up now.
Despite multiple opportunities for Morag to accost or at least inconvenience Rex on suspicion of being an Orion spy, the game's story never really bothers with the Orion and Ardanian conflict until it begins at Temperantia just as quickly and abruptly as it suddenly ends. Also, as a side note, that lengthy interlude with the Nopon characters is weirdly the exception to the game's issues with narrative payoff. Tora's arc is one of the most fully realized in the entire game, with backstory involving his missing father providing his motivation for building Poppy, leading into the revelation that his father is alive and being held captive as part of Bonna's villainous machinations. It's a shame that this arc has absolutely nothing to do with the core goal of getting to Elysium, which makes the entire thing utterly irrelevant and forgettable. The disparity between big moments and narrative structure ironically is most obvious in the second half of the game after the story becomes more focused on Pyra and Mythra's kidnapping in Tontal. After the king's failed attempt to destroy the Aegis in a dangerous close call with saving Tontal's Titan, the party is ambushed by Jin and Malos, who kidnap Pyra and Mythra. It's here that Rex's character is questioned for the first time. Up until this point, Rex has ostensibly been focused on a singular goal: get Pyra to Elysium. It's something that he has reaffirmed over and over in a number of the game's big moments. On top of this, there's an implied budding romance between the two, with a number of scenes dedicated to the bond they have together. We see it at the end of Chapter 2 during their first big scene together, in the mercenary camp after the fight with Akos when Vandam observes that Rex is fighting for a special girl.
People got plenty reasons to fight. Like fighting for a special girl. I see that a lot. Though not every girl has a strange crystal in her chest, eh?
You mean Pyra? We're just...
And in the visit to Fonset Village, where they share a tender moment at the graves of Rex's parents.
Hey, Mum, Dad, it's been a while. A ton happened, you know? I became a driver. And this girl is Pyra. My new partner. I know you'd love her.
So, when the time finally comes for someone to confront Rex on his failings and flaws as a character, what is it that we focus on?
So you'll do it. Open the gates to Elysium for us.
Yes. If that is your wish.
Don't, Pyra! They'll just...
Jin?
Very well.
Pyra!
Look at the state of you. You hadn't even noticed. Your own blade has been wounded so deeply, and all you can think of is yourself. You awakened the Aegis. I thought you might have been different, but you're just a fool.
Hey, Jin, buddy, what exactly do you think is happening right now? Pyra's gambit in this scene is that she knows Malos and Jin need to take her alive in order to carry out their plans. So she's threatening to destroy herself so that she can bargain with them and make them leave her friends unharmed. Rex clearly isn't on board with this gambit because he knows that Jin and Malos are just gonna kill her when they don't need her anymore. And Jin's big accusation against Rex is that he's only thinking about himself. Why on earth is this the direction the scene goes in? I mean, I know exactly why. It's because we need to have a big moment where the party yells at Rex to get him to start caring about Pyra. It's a conflict that is completely manufactured for the sake of big moments that are totally unearned. Rex's singular goal for the entire game has been to fulfill Pyra's wish, but even his meeting with Adam in the Spirit Crucible Elpis reinforces the idea that Rex was never truly a partner to Pyra whom she could rely on.
Your will to fight comes from your will to protect. Blades and mortals are linked. When you take on the weight of all the fear she carries, then you will be her true driver.
The ultimate revelation of how exactly Rex failed to care about Pyra honestly comes off as being more her fault than Rex's. When Rex arrives at the Cliffs of Moratha to rescue Pyra, we learn her true reason for wanting to go to Elysium.
The reason why we wanted to go there was to beg our father to let us die.
Wait, didn't she just threaten to kill herself in order to bargain with Jin and Mala? Rex, of course, was not aware of Pyra's death wish because she refused to open up and be honest with him. And yet, in the emotional big moment that resolves this conflict and allows Rex to become the Aegis's true driver, the story presents Rex as the one that needed to grow and change.
I was stupid. I didn't understand Pyra and Mythra's feelings. Though we were destined to follow different paths, I tried to walk together. I walked in the shadow of the Aegis's light, blindly walking my own path, while she walked alone.
What are you blathering about?
What exactly is Rex guilty of here? Not trying to help Pyra with burdens that she was actively hiding from him? It feels as though the story is gaslighting Rex, tricking him into believing that he never does anything right, even though his only concern for the entire story has been fulfilling Pyra's desires. This arc is an entire chapter of the game, and it takes up over 2.5 hours in cutscenes alone, but it utterly fails to deliver a coherent character arc for the game's main character. It is a series of big moments without the narrative legwork put in to set them up and make them feel gratifying, and it leaves Xenoblade 2's most memorable scenes feeling cheap, unearned, and devoid of meaning. So, to contrast, how does Xenoblade 1 earn Shulk's big moments? We know that his goal is one of seeking revenge, but the story opens with Shulk living a simple life in Colony 9. From his first moments in the game, we see Shulk motivated by scientific study, salvaging broken down Mechon parts for use in his lab. We see his curiosity to the unknown, as well as his friendship with Reyn and Fiora. Reyn takes the time to protect Shulk from monsters, and Fiora shares a quiet moment with Shulk as she brings him food, showing frustration at how laid back and non-committal he can be.
It's amazing.
Oh, Shulk, you say that every day.
Not quite. It's always delicious, but today it's amazing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness. I used some special herbs and spices today. So if you said it was just the same as usual, I'd know for sure you had no sense of taste.
The opening chapter gives the sense that these three have known each other and lived here for a long time, which makes it all the more significant when their lives are torn apart, and Fiora is killed by Metalface. The game's first big moment, Fiora's death, feels earned because we can feel Shulk's loss just as clearly and deeply as he can.
I'll kill you!
This big moment also serves as a turning point that sets up the remainder of the game, as Shulk now gains the singular goal of destroying the Mechon and taking revenge for everything that he's lost. From here, Shulk's emotional arc comes naturally as a result of his clear motivations, leading to big moments that feed back into his core conflict. In the fight to save Juju, he sees a vision of Sharla's death, mirroring his loss of Fiora in Colony 9. The difference this time is that Shulk has the power to save her, demonstrating his growth since leaving home.
Can I save her?
Of course you can.
He comes to rely on his visions, believing that they are the key to defeating the Mechon and achieving his goals. And it's one of his visions that leads him to seek his next big moment at Prison Island. Prison Island is a major turning point for the game, where Shulk meets Zanza and unlocks the true power of the Monado. Shulk acts impulsively, choosing to free Zanza despite Melia's warnings.
Something's not right. The Forefathers must have had good reason to seal him.
I need that power. I thought you of all people would understand.
I do, but it's just...
Melia, please understand. I must do what I set out to. The Mechon must pay.
From there, things start to go downhill as the Mechon arrive to stop Zanza, something that they could only do because Shulk blindly followed his visions here and trusted things he saw himself doing. In the ensuing fight, Melia's father is killed, and Shulk learns a shocking truth. Fiora is alive, piloting the silver-faced Mechon. This is one of the most dramatic and memorable sequences in the game, but it's also one that carefully weaves together both main story progression and advancing character arcs. Shulk's single-minded goal is now much more complicated, as he learns the friend he sought to avenge is one of the Mechon he has been fighting, and his blind reliance on visions of the future is punished with the death of Melia's father. With the added goal of rescuing Fiora, the story continues to Galahad Fortress, where Shulk confronts Egil, the leader of Mechonis. At this point, Shulk bravely risks his life to protect Fiora, but he ultimately doesn't understand the truth of what's going on and fails to defeat Egil. Nevertheless, his bravery and commitment to Fiora is rewarded in the aftermath, when they reunite on the beaches of the Fallen Arm. It's here that Shulk gets his first big moment of absolution, when he nurses Fiora back to health, effectively undoing his loss of her at the beginning of the game.
You do remember me, Fiora.
Of course I do. Shulk.
There's still so much at this point that Shulk doesn't know, and he has a long road ahead of him to stop Egil and save the people of Bionis. But even though his quest is far from over, he earns a moment of peace as he wins back part of the life that was taken from him. It's the most emotional scene of the game so far, but it's one that is carried by the weight of everything that led up to this point. This big moment couldn't be separated from its place in the story because it is a culmination of the journey so far and a resolution that makes way for the conflict still to come. And there is plenty of conflict still to come, because here is where Shulk's arc starts to get complicated. His single-minded goal of revenge against the Mechon starts to shift as he learns about the Machina, the innocent people of Mechonis whose lives have been upended by Egil just as his was. Shulk's goal is no longer to destroy the Mechon, but instead to defeat Egil and save the people of both Bionis and Mechonis. Even as he begins to question the nature of the power he receives from the Monado, he pushes his doubts aside, believing that he needs it in order to achieve his goals.
Without the power, I can't stop Egil. I have to concentrate. All I have to think about is how to stop the Mechonis. If the Monado does bring about the end, then I know what to do.
And then comes his final confrontation with Egil and the revelation of Zanza's true plan.
Kill him. Kill him.
That voice. Who is that?
Strike him down.
Shulk finally begins to question whether his motives are truly his own, as Zanza's voice in his head encourages him to kill Egil and take his revenge. Shulk stays his hand and realizes that the two of them both share the same pain. He finally begins to break away from Zanza's influence, making his own choices for the first time in the game.
All I can do is this, Egil. We can live in peace again.
And he's rewarded with Dixon's betrayal.
You shouldn't have done that, little brat.
It's here that Shulk is at his lowest point. Forced to think back on his quest so far, he starts to believe that everything he did so far was pointless, acting as nothing more than Zanza's puppet. However, things start to turn around as Alvis convinces him that there is still a reason to stand and fight.
Nothing that exists is perfect. It is a sad truth,
But you can learn from it and begin the journey on a new path. Not Zanza's path, but one that you forge yourselves. Our own path. So, decide, Shulk. Will you walk the path laid out by Zanza, or will you walk a new path? That was always how it was going to be. If I'd wanted to walk the predetermined path, I wouldn't have come this far. Even with the odds stacked against us, even though I can't see the future, I'll keep walking. My own path, that I decide.
Though he may have played into Zanza's hands, Shulk has been able to change the future for the better. And now, as someone who exists outside of fate, he's the only thing that can fight the fate laid out by Zanza. But of course, one thing still stands between Shulk and Zanza: Dixon. As a disciple of Zanza, Dixon is responsible for much of the hardship Shulk has faced so far. However, Dixon is also the closest thing Shulk has ever had to a father, since he rescued the boy from an expedition gone wrong that killed both of his parents. Their final confrontation ends with Shulk and Dixon both trying to keep up a brave face, giving Shulk one last reminder of everything that Zanza has taken from him.
Damn. How'd that kid get so strong? I ain't gonna let you see me die. I won't give you the satisfaction of victory. See ya, kid. Looks like the student finally surpassed the teacher.
Shulk, his wounds.
With this final loss, Shulk presses forward to challenge Zanza, and Zanza tries to persuade Shulk to become his disciple.
You did a great deed in granting me a new Monado. I will gladly take you as my new disciple, Shulk.
It's one last test of faith, as Shulk is offered eternal life in exchange for loyalty. What's important here is that Shulk does not merely refuse, he also reaffirms the one goal he has had since the very beginning of the game: to take back the life that Zanza's schemes tore apart.
I don't want to be your vessel or your disciple. I just want to live my life as a Homs in a world without you.
In the end, Shulk defeats Zanza, fulfilling his quest for revenge and earning the right to remake the world as its new god. But Shulk defies this chance, believing that the fate of the world should belong to all of its people.
I won't decide. The future should be decided by each and every person in the world. And so, what we wish for is a world with no gods!
Shulk's final big moment, creating a world without gods, is earned as the culmination of everything he wanted since the very start of his journey. Everything that he lost was the result of Zanza's machinations, and everything he gained, the friends he met along the way, the peace he brokered between nations, and the new world he created, was gained as part of his quest to defeat Zanza. It's a powerful arc that carries weight and emotion right to the very end, because every event builds upon the last, crafting a story with big moments that are given meaning by scenes, instead of scenes that serve as filler to drive us between big moments. Part 3. I want to just call Xenoblade Chronicles 2 garbage and move on with my life, but it's just not that simple. Despite everything, I did enjoy Xenoblade Chronicles 2. It's tough to play a game for 70 hours over the course of a few weeks without liking some part of it. In a way, that's what makes the game invoke such strong feelings of disappointment from me, since I think there's a lot of clear potential that the game never quite realizes. The world of Alrest has a lot of stories that want to be told, the least of which being the nature of blades and their relationship with humans. Blades can only awaken from a core crystal when they resonate with a human driver, and when the human dies, they return to their core crystal, losing all of their memories. The life of a blade is inescapably linked with that of their driver, leading to lifelong companionship that could be explored so much more than it is. This topic could carry an entire story's worth of drama, but Jin's grief over Laura and his choice to become a flesh eater so that he won't have to forget about her is pretty much the only real interest in this topic that the main story seems to have. A few Blade side quests touch on this, but the gacha system the game uses for Blades makes it so you don't have any way to guarantee you can actually see those quests, and the only one I actually got to see for myself was hilariously callous about the subject. The quest where you obtain Vess's core crystal starts with you meeting Vess and her driver and hearing stories about how the two grew close and treat each other as family. The quest culminates in Rex and friends witnessing Vess's driver die of old age on screen in front of them, as Vess abruptly returns to her core crystal in the middle of cooking a meal. The party barely reacts to this, going so far as to just leave his body in the chair where he died as the scene continues. It's a shocking lack of pathos that makes the entire thing feel like a rushed afterthought. Eventually, it's even revealed that one of your party members, Nia, is in fact a Blade herself, but this also comes out of nowhere and ultimately means nothing. We get to see pieces of Nia's backstory as she's forced to become a flesh eater by her grieving driver who wants to make her a stand-in for his late daughter. It's an entire character arc's worth of revelations all contained within a single dungeon, with as little relevance to the plot up to that point as it has to anything that comes afterwards. In fact, Nia being a Blade is rarely mentioned again in the main story after it's revealed, and given how little focus it gets, I could imagine a version of the story that doesn't bring it up at all. It feels more like a loose end to justify why Nia was with Torna rather than a fully realized character arc. I mentioned earlier that tensions between Araya and Morardain receive too little focus, but the same is also true of the war 50 years ago featuring Morardain's colonialist conquest of Gormod. Again, NPCs and some side quests discuss lingering resentment among the Gormadi people, but like with Nia's arc, it almost feels like an afterthought to justify why there's an Ardanian military base in Gormod. We never see any form of government in Gormod, not even a local mayor in charge of Torgoth. The closest we get is Dougal, the consul, which is basically the same thing as an ambassador, so it's hard to say what exactly the Ardanian occupation means for the average citizen. The only time the main story ever interacts with this history is a brief scene in Indol with some Gormadi refugees holding an anti-Blade protest, and, well...
Yes, they're a funny old lot, you know. We feed them, we water them, and this is the thanks we get. Don't these ruffians know that manners cost nothing? I swear, you lend these people a hand and they want the whole bloody arm.
Yeah, the less said about that scene, the better. The game also barely explores the unique situation of Pyra and Mythra's shared body. From a strict story perspective, I'm not sure what the reason for making Pyra and Mythra distinct characters was, because it doesn't really do anything but serve as the catalyst for a plot twist where it's revealed that Mythra exists. There was a lot of potential to really examine what these two characters are in relation to each other that the story is hilariously apathetic towards. I mean, just think about it. Pyra exists as an alternate personality that was created to deal with Mythra's trauma over the destruction of Torna. Pyra is more emotionally mature, capable of handling situations that Mythra is unable or unwilling to live through herself. It's a much more sympathetic perspective on a character with split personalities than we usually see in fiction, since stories often fall into the stereotype of split personalities meaning a good side and an evil side. But in practice, we really don't see any particular dynamic between Pyra and Mythra. They appear in cutscenes interchangeably, with Mythra getting a lot of scenes about the power of the Aegis, and Pyra getting the more emotional scenes with Rex, but there's never really any scenes about the two of them as a paired unit. This frankly gets weirder after the introduction of Numa, where in the famous coffee with milk scene, Mythra states that there's no difference between them at all.
So you're Pythra? Myra?
It doesn't matter. Pyra, Mythra, they're both me. Call me whichever.
And this reinforces what Rex says to Zeke when they're on the way to Tonsil.
Say, chum, which one do you fancy? Pyra or Mythra?
Zeke. You can't just ask someone... Anyway, they're the same person. I've never really thought of them separately.
Okay, so I guess the game's interpretation is not that Pyra and Mythra are two distinct people, it's that they're two aspects of the same character. Alright, you could make an interesting story out of that. So, what exactly does Xenoblade 2 end up doing with that idea? Oh. Well, alright then. I finished Xenoblade Chronicles 2 with a strong feeling of sadness, because of how clearly I could see the game I wish it was somewhere within it. It's a game that obviously resonated with a lot of people in a big way, and I've seen it described as one of the best RPGs on Switch. My goal in making this video isn't to change people's minds and convince you that actually you didn't like this game, you hated it all along and just didn't realize it. Rather, I wanted to explain why I feel the way that I do, and hopefully help people to understand why it is that I felt let down by Xenoblade 2. As I write this, Xenoblade 3 is almost here, and it's gotten me thinking about what it is I want from a new Xenoblade game. There's an obvious instinct to say that I want it to go back to everything that Xenoblade 1 was, but I don't think that's what I want either. Xenoblade 1 is one of my favorite games ever made, but I don't want a sequel to just be Xenoblade 1, but again. I wanted Xenoblade 2 to be the best version of itself. I wanted it to more deeply explore a society with people who are permanently bonded and in some ways chained to the lives of others. I wanted it to show the turmoil and hardships of living in a world as fraught with war and inequality as Alrest is. I wanted it to explore the relationship between two characters who share the same body and life that can stand in for each other to make up for each other's weaknesses. I wanted Xenoblade 2 to succeed at being Xenoblade 2. And that is what I want from Xenoblade Chronicles 3. There is a schism in the Xenoblade fanbase that Xenoblade 3's plot feels like a humorous metaphor for. A war between what appears to be the worlds of Bionis and Alrest represents the tension between fans of Xenoblade 1 and 2 that has been pervasive over the past 5 years. Rather than a complete rollback to Xenoblade 1, I want Xenoblade 3 to combine the best of both 1 and 2 into something new that can live up to the standards set by both games. I hope that it can help to heal the division between Xenoblade fans and bring us together with common ground, something that both sides of the schism can love. Because despite years of arguing over which game is better, whether anime ruins Xenoblade, and whether nostalgia prevents people from giving a game a fair shot, I think that there is one thing we can all agree on. Xenoblade X deserves a Switch port.
Show us light from now. Show us light for where we can go.
This video was made possible by our generous supporters on Patreon. Did you know that Nintendo World Report is funded directly by fans like you? When you support Nintendo World Report on Patreon, you get immediate access to multiple exclusive podcasts every month, exclusive Discord channels, an early look at select content, and more, all for as little as $1 a month. Check out patreon.com/NWR for all the details.
Just ignore